Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Yinzers at the Point podcast. I am your host, Tyler Aaron. If you want to follow me on Instagram or Twitter, it is at TylerAaron65, or you can follow the show's Instagram or Twitter at PenguinsFan65. And in today's episode, we are going to look at why did the Penguins turn down a chance at trading Jason Zucker. In the next segment, we will look at the Penguins' 2022-2023 training camp roster, and we will wrap up this segment with my thoughts on Brian Burke's comments on the Penguins this upcoming season, and that is all coming up right after this drop.
Oh, slap me, silly Sydney. Oh, save my face with a rusty razor. Oh, Murphy and the fans are planning like a butcher's dog. Oh, let's go hunt moose on a Harley. Oh, scratch my back with a hat. As he beats Theodore like a rated mule. Ladies and gentlemen, you got it. Elvis has just left the building.
Welcome back to this episode of the Yinzers at the Point podcast. I am your host, Tyler Aaron. If you want to follow me on Instagram or Twitter, it is at TylerAaron65, or you can follow the show's Instagram or Twitter at PenguinsFan65. And before I get into this first segment here, I just want to clarify that I decided not to upload a podcast on Monday because it was Labor Day, and I just wanted to enjoy my holiday weekend with my family. So I know I really didn't say anything, or I noticed that I wouldn't be uploading on Monday. I just wanted to say that, and I'm going to try to keep posting 3 days a week. I'm only planning on posting 2 this week. That would be today and Friday, excuse me. So only 2 this week. Again, I do apologize. I just thought that it would be nice to enjoy the holiday. And so we're going to jump right on in to this first segment. Why did the Penguins turn down a chance at trading Jason Zucker? So an article came out today from Pittsburgh Hockey Now by Dave Molinari. I'm hoping I'm saying that right. But basically, the Penguins had a chance this summer to trade away Jason Zucker as a cap dump. Currently, right now on his deal, he has 1 year left at $5.5 million. And so basically, a team reached out to the Penguins this summer, and they offered a trade for Jason Zucker. The trade was Jason Zucker and a first-round pick from the Penguins for basically nothing. It was future considerations. We do know that it is believed to be another Metropolitan Division club. When I hear that, I'm thinking it is someone like the Flyers, maybe the Blue Jackets, 2 teams who seem to be in a retool or a rebuild. I know Columbus, they just signed those big key pieces. They don't really have the salary cap right now. The Flyers kind of do, but Ron Hextall decided against this to make this trade, and I totally agree with Ron Hextall on this because the Penguins, they're trying to save their draft picks. They're trying to build up their prospect pool. We don't have much time left, so it's nice to build those prospects, and we have only drafted in the first round like 3 times in the past 10 years, it feels like. So why would you trade away a first-round pick to lose some of your main future coming up this year, and just dealing it away for absolutely nothing? Just for a cap dump, it doesn't make any sense, especially since there's only 1 year. Now, if Jason Zucker had a contract like Jeff Skinner, who I think he has 4 or 5 years still at $9 million or $8 or $9 million, now that would be something I consider. But Jason Zucker's cap is not the worst right now. So I see no point in potentially trading this pick and Jason Zucker for it. So, I mean, that salary will be coming off the Penguins' books at the end of the season because he will be a free agency. Another bad contract in Brian Dumoulin at $4.1 million. He'll be off the books. And then you can use some of that money to re-sign Tristan Jarry and whatnot. So I would imagine this is the Philadelphia Flyers here. It could be the Blue Jackets. I doubt it would be a contender like the Rangers, who just seem to be trading their first-round picks to get players to hopefully win a Stanley Cup this year. So I can't imagine it not being the Blue Jackets or the Flyers. I would imagine it's one of those two teams. I think they're more incapable of... I don't know what their cap space right now is, but I'm sure it's around $5 million. So I'm very... I totally agree with Ron Hextall's decision. I mean, last year, Jason Zucker in only 41 games had 8 goals, 9 assists, 17 points with a plus-minus and -2. And in the playoffs, in 5 games, he had 0 goals, 2 assists, 2 points with a plus-minus and -3. So, not the greatest. I think that Jason Zucker can have a bounce-back year, obviously, with him being healthy, and hopefully he plays the entire year. He has hit 60-plus points before in a season. He's more than capable of doing that here in Pittsburgh. Hextall and the Penguins organization has really made this clear that they want to build the Penguins pool of prospects, and obviously your first round draft picks should be and will be the most important part of building up your prospect pool. So, and I don't think that the Penguins really want to let go of Zucker in a way, too. He's still a top 6 forward, even though he didn't really play like one last year. I'm very curious to see what he can do, if he can prove himself, and could sign another contract extension with the Penguins. So, just in Jason Zucker's career with the Penguins, he's had 23 goals, 24 assists. I believe that adds up to 47 points in 94 games since coming over from that trade with the Minnesota Wild. He can be great on the penalty kill if you put him there. He can be a contributor on your power play. I'd like to see that Jason Zucker and Todd Reirden really connect, and maybe Todd Reirden can mold Jason Zucker into one of those good forwards like what we saw out of Evan Rodriguez in the first half of the season and whatnot. But Jason Zucker is out of his prime. He's 30 years old, so I think that Jason Zucker can hit 20 goals. It just depends on whether or not he stays healthy. I know his contract is really bad right now and it's hurting the Penguins, but there's nothing you can do. If you want to keep your first round pick, then you kind of have Jason Zucker stuck on your team. So I know a lot of Penguins fans wants him gone and whatnot, but I think that this was the right decision from Ron Hextall. So yeah, so those are my thoughts and why the Penguins turned down a chance to trade Jason Zucker. So coming up in the next segment, we are going to talk about the Penguins 2022-2023 training camp roster. And that is coming up right after this. Alright, I am back here on the Inters at the Point podcast. I am your host, Tyler Aaron. If you want to follow me on Instagram or Twitter, it is at TylerAaron65. Or you can follow the show's Instagram or Twitter at PenguinsFan65. And in this segment, we are going to talk about the Penguins 2022-2023 training camp roster. So, if you haven't seen yet. Yesterday, the Penguins released their training camp roster and their rookie camp roster. But today, I'm only going to go through the Penguins training camp roster, and in the next episode, we will look at the rookie camp roster. So, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and start reading all the players on the Penguins 2022-23 training camp roster, and I'm going to start off with the forwards, starting with number 10, Drew O'Connor. He was on the fourth line last season and was mostly a healthy scratch. If not, he'd be in Wilkes-Barre and just played a handful of games last year. Next up, number 15, Josh Archibald. This is his second stint with the Penguins, and I believe the last time he played with us, he was number 45 or 46, and I believe we dealt him to either the Oilers or the Coyotes. I can't remember which one, but so moving on, number 16 is Jason Zucker. We just talked about him in the last segment, so if you skipped over the first segment, you should go ahead and listen back to the first segment. Next up is number 17, Brian Rust. Spent his entire career with the Penguins, had a really good season last year. So moving on, number 18, Drake Caggiula, newly acquired in free agency from the Buffalo Sabres. So nothing really to say about him. I imagine he would be in the AHL to start off the season. So moving on, number 19 is Alex Nylander. We acquired him back in January in a 1-for-1 deal with the Blackhawks. It was Sam Lafferty for Alex Nylander. He spent his entire time in Wilkes-Barre, so let's see if he can make a jump this season to the NHL roster. Next up, number 22, Sam Polan, or Polan. He was the 2019 first-round draft pick for the Penguins, and hopefully he can crack either the AHL or the NHL roster. Again, I'd like to see him playing in the NHL this year, but we'll see. Next up, number 23, Brock McGinn. Got him in free agency last year. Great penalty killer for the Penguins. He was mostly why we were one of the top penalty kills last season. So, moving along, number 25, Ryan Pelling, newly acquired from the Montreal Canadiens. Moving on, number 27, Corey Andonovansky. I hope I said that right, but I'm pretty sure he was in Wilkes-Barre last season, so I don't think there's no way that he'll crack the NHL roster, so expect him in Wilkes-Barre. Next one, a potential to maybe crack the Penguins lineup. It's very unlikely, but I've always liked this guy. Number 34, Nathan Legare. He is always a great preseason guy for the Penguins. His shot is absolutely amazing, so I'm very curious to see what he does in preseason, see in training camp, and see if he can turn some heads. So moving right along, number 36, Philip Hollander. I guess this is his second stint. He was drafted by us, and I think it was either the second or the third round. Traded him for Kasperi Kapanen, and then got him back in a trade where we sent Jared McCann to Toronto. Moving on, number 39, Sam Howd. Pretty positive he was in Wilkes-Barre, so he won't most likely crack the Penguins roster. Moving on to number 42, Kasperi Kapanen. Hopefully he has a better season than what he did last year. So I am rooting for him and see if that contract is being lived up to him. Moving on, number 43, Danton Heinen. Heck of a player. 18 goals last season. Very excited that he's back in a Penguins uniform. Moving on to number 45, Jonathan Gruden. Still one of the Penguins' best prospects on the team. We got him in the Matt Murray trade when we traded him to Ottawa. Moving on, number 46 is Jordan Frasca. No really thoughts on him. Moving on to number 51, Ty Glover. Nothing really on him either. Number 53, Teddy Bluger. Very self-forward. One of our best penalty killers, as well as Brock McGinn, our fourth line center. Cap hit, not the best, but that's all I got to say on Mr. Bluger. So moving on, number 57, Jamie Devane. Nothing really on him. Number 59, Jake Getzel. Heck of a player. Easily one of the best players on the Penguins. Nothing more, nothing less. Number 63 is next. That is Radim Sahorna. Mostly in NHL scratch. Did see a few games last season. I think that he's one of the most likely to win that 12th forward spot on the Penguins. I like his game. His defensive ability is amazing, and he is tall, and he is pretty much like a Brandon Tanev. He is an enforcer. I'm very excited. I'm a big Radim Sahorna fan. Next up, number 67, Ricard Raquel. Nothing real in Ricard Raquel. I'm very excited to see what he does in a full-year production with the Penguins playing with Malkin and Crosby. Speaking of Malkin, he's next up as number 71. He's amazing. Future Hall of Famer. Nothing really more to say. Next up, number 72, Lucas Shevkovsky. One of the Penguins' best prospects on the team. I don't think he'll crack the Penguins roster this year, but expect him on the Penguins roster in the next few seasons. Next up, number 75, Kyle Olsen. Nothing really on him. Next, one of the Penguins' top prospects as well, number 76, Valtteri Puustinen. I know that he's one of the main guys to win that fourth line spot. I don't think he'll be able to do it. I think that he needs another production year in the AHL before you bring him up. Next up, number 77, Jeff Carter. Hopefully we see first half of the season Jeff Carter this year versus second half. Moving on, number 80, Ravis Ansons. Nothing really on him. And wrapping it up with your captain, number 87, Sidney Crosby. He's an absolute superstar in this league, and he will hit over a point per game, and I am very excited to see what this forward group can do in training camp and the preseason and obviously the regular season. So those are all of the forwards on the Penguins training camp roster. So now moving on to the Penguins defense. That would be starting with number 2, Chad Ruedel. Based on the Penguins' current defensive situation, I see him as defenseman number 7 on the depth chart. So I actually don't think that he'll be on the opening night roster. If he does, it means that either we decide to send someone down like Ty Smith or just develop a bit, or one of our big defensemen does get hurt. Moving on, number 4, Taylor Fadoon. He was the captain for our AHL team, Wilkes-Barre, so I expect him to be the captain again for Wilkes-Barre, so I don't think that he will see any NHL playing time unless our defense gets severely hurt. Moving on to the last single-digit defenseman, number 8, Brian Dumoulin. We're about to get his contract off the books, so hopefully Dumoulin can have a prove-it year and maybe get an extension with the Penguins. Moving on, number 24, Ty Smith, newly acquired from the Devils with that third-round pick for John Marino. Nothing more to say on Ty Smith. I see him cracking the opening night roster, so I am hoping that will happen. Next up, the other newly acquired defenseman, Jeff Petrie. I just saw pictures yesterday of Jeff Petrie for the first time in the Penguin gear. He looks amazing. I'm very excited for him this year. Moving on, number 28, Marcus Pettersson. Nothing really on him. His contract is probably the worst on the Penguins, so hopefully he can step it up. Moving on, number 32, Mitch Reinke. Nothing really on him. Next up, number 37, Jack St. Ivany. I'm pretty sure we just drafted him last year, so I don't know if he'll crack the AHL team. He might go play in his respective league or go to the CHL. I don't know. Next up, our first round draft pick, number 38, Owen Pickering. I could see Pickering potentially breaking the AHL roster, but I would let him develop, of course, so the Penguins can get that star defenseman that he can potentially become. Next up, number 41, Nolan Collins. I believe another one of our draft picks. Again, just let him develop. Next up, another newly acquired, number 44, Jan Ruda. I'm very excited with Jan Ruda. He can play on either side of your defensive pairing, so you can potentially see him in the top 4, whether it's playing with the Tang, Petrie, Dumoulin, or I see him on the opening roster playing on the third pairing, so we'll see how that goes. Next up, number 48, John Lizotte. Should still be in the AHL. I don't think that he will crack. You see, here the thing with these defensemen is we have like 9 NHL defensemen, so most of these defensemen won't crack the roster. So moving on, next up, number 50, Josh Maniscalco, or Calco, sorry. Nothing really on him. Next up, number 52, Mark Friedman. I would expect him to be an NHL scratch opening night. I think Friedman's one of the players where you don't send down to the AHL unless you absolutely have to. Moving on, number 55, Chris Ortiz. Nothing really on him. Next, number 58, your assistant captain, Chris Letang. I am expecting another great season. I mean, he had a career season last year. We'll see what he can do this year. Next up, number 61, Xavier Ouellet. Newly acquired in free agency from the Canadiens. I would expect him to start the season in Montreal and should be one of the first AHL call-ups if we need to. Next up, number 62, Colin Sawyer. Nothing on him. Next up, another one of the Penguins' top prospects, number 73, Pierre-Olivier Joseph. I could see him cracking opening night, but he really has to impress the organization. And I think that Pierre-Olivier Joseph could be a good trading chip for the Penguins, even though I'd hate to see him go. He just really has to prove himself this season. Next up, number 74, Ryan McCleary. Nothing on him. And to wrap up the defenseman, number 78, Isaac Beliveau. Again, nothing on him as well. And so finally, we are going to get to the goaltenders. No worries, there's only 6 of them, so it should be very easy. So starting off with your backup goaltender, number 1, Casey DeSmith. Number 31, Philip Lindbergh. He should be in the AHL next season. Another one of our good goaltending prospects, along with this other guy I'm about to say, number 33, Taylor Gauthier. Philip Lindbergh and Taylor Gauthier is our top 2 goaltending prospects. They're our best. Expect them in the NHL in 5 years max, I would say. Probably a lot less than that. Based on who has the better upside, it's very hard to tell. Next up, number 35, Tristan Jarry, our starter, our superstar. It varies it sucks that he wasn't even named in the top 10 goalies. That will be another one of the segments for Friday's episode, so stay tuned for that episode. Next up is newly acquired number 40, Dustin Tokarski. He should be the AHL starter. Dustin Tokarski played for Wilkes-Barre a few seasons ago, but then left and played in Buffalo. He's a great goaltender. He's the replacement for Louis Domingue, so he would easily be the backup if either Jari or DeSmith does get hurt. And finally, the last goaltender being number 60, Tommy Napier, or Napier. One of the two, but nothing really on him. So that's going to do it for the training camp roster this year. So training camp starts in, I think, 15 days from now. That would be the 22nd, I believe, is when it starts. So I'm very excited. And then the preseason's almost 3 weeks away, a little over. Penguins' first preseason game is on September 25th against the Blue Jackets. And pretty soon, when that starts, a few weeks later, Penguins are playing the Coyotes on the 13th for opening night. So get ready for it. It's coming in quick. But that is going to do it for this segment of the Penguins 2022-23 training camp roster. So coming up in the next segment, we are going to look at my thoughts on Brian Burke's comments on the Penguins this upcoming season. And that is all coming up right after this. Alright, I am back here on the Yinzers at the Point podcast. I am your host, Tyler Aaron. If you want to follow me on Instagram or Twitter, it is at TylerAaron65. Or you can follow the show's Instagram or Twitter at PenguinsFan65. And in the final segment of today's episode, we are going to look at my thoughts on Brian Burke's comments on the Penguins this upcoming season. So a few days ago, Brian Burke was interviewed over at the Lemieux Sports Complex, I believe. So I'm going to go over his quotes again. So Brian Burke does feel that the team has gotten a crap ton better than what the roster will look like with versus the Rangers last season. I will agree with Brian Burke here. It does feel like the team is about the same last year. Our forward depth is not as good as it was last year, but our defense, I mean, it did get older, but it is bolstered. So, moving on, Brian Burke also loves the adding defenseman depth with Jeff Petrie and Ty Smith, and also Jan Ruda. And that was pretty much the primary reason of why he thinks that the Penguins roster has gotten better. He's very excited to see full year production from guys like Crosby, Jari, Dumoulin, Raquel. Obviously, all the new guys. Hopefully, Jason Zucker, obviously. Ricard Raquel. I believe I already said him. And also, the very critical part of this offseason was bringing back Evgeny Malkin and Chris Letang. So here is what Ron Hextall had to say about that. That was a critical part of the strategy, obviously, to bring back Letang and Malkin. To me, bringing them back makes our team better than if they weren't here, which was in doubt. He also says stuff on Ricard Raquel, calling him a key addition to the Penguins during the trade deadline, and noted the importance of getting Rust locked up. I obviously agree with that. I didn't really think Ricard Raquel was coming back to the Penguins. I believe getting Malkin, Letang, Rust, and Ricard Raquel, I think it was a total of $22.5 million, which is absolutely amazing, especially for the salary cap ceiling being $82.5 million this season. Burke also pointed out about the waiver-exempt players who are expected to compete for NHL and AHL positions. Those big ones being Drew O'Connor and Ty Smith. They're very young. Ty Smith, I think his contract is $825K. I know it expires at the end of the season, and he'll be an RFA though, so we should be okay. The Penguins are planning on dealing a defenseman or two, especially with 9 NHL caliber ones being on the training camp roster. Those being Chris Letang, Brian Dumoulin, Jeff Petrie, Ty Smith, Jan Ruda, Marcus Pedersen, Chad Ruedel, Mark Freeman, and there is one more I can't think of off the top of my head. So, yeah, I can't think of this guy. So, anyway, he was further specifying on potential trading and stuff. Brian Burke said, "We don't have anything active with trade discussions right now, but other teams have asked about our defensemen, so it's a possibility." So it is possible for a trade to happen pretty soon. I don't think that is imminent right now at this point, even though some teams have asked about it. I don't think that is the case right now because, I mean, are you willing, if you want to take a cap dump in trading someone like Pedersen or Dumoulin, do you really want to trade a first-round pick and potentially the other team drafting a franchise player with that pick? Especially with the Penguins prospect pool not being that good right now. And yeah, I would just keep the pick, and I don't know what to do. Hopefully have him have a breakout season. Brian Burke also says, "I don't know if we are going to do anything else between now and camp. It's unlikely, but the phones are still ringing this time of year. People are still calling around." So, like I said, I wouldn't risk it right now. So we're pretty much going to see this roster during the training camp. I don't think that there will be any more moves. So, with that being said, that is going to do it for this episode of the Insers at the Point podcast. Again, there will only be 2 episodes this week. Next episode will be on Friday, September 9th. I just started school, my senior year at high school, so hopefully my schoolwork won't affect much the podcast. So as of right now, it's still going to be 3 episodes a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. I will post something if something changes. So again, that is going to do it for this episode, and I will talk to you all on Friday.